This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, the Algerian oil tanker in Acre sailed today for Lebanon with the first cargo of fuel oil designed to restart the country's power stations and prevent the country from being plunged into darkness. The Israeli occupation forces committed 3 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the last 24 hours, resulting in the killing of at least 42 Palestinians. A convoy of humanitarian aid from the World Food Programme entered Sudan on Thursday via border crossing at Adre between Chad and Darfur for the first time after the 6 months of closure. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Zmani. Starting today's news, the Algerian oil tanker in Acre sailed today for Lebanon with the first cargo of 30,000 tons of fuel oil designed to restart the country's power stations and prevent the country from being plunged into darkness. Mohammed Khatil has the details.
On Sunday, Algeria decided to supply the quantities of fuel needed to run Lebanon's power plants as a gesture of solidarity necessary to keep Lebanon's power stations running. Other shipments will follow, but for the moment, the total quantity of fuel oil to be sent has not been communicated. The decision was taken by the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, following Saturday's announcement by Lebanon's public electricity supplier due to a lack of fuel. Prime Minister Nadir Al-Arbawi had a telephone conversation with the Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati to inform him of the decision taken by President Tebboune to stand by brotherly Lebanon and to supply it immediately with quantities of fuel oil in order to get the power stations back on and restore electricity. According to the Lebanese press, since Saturday, the Lebanese have had to rely almost exclusively on private generators to supply them with electricity. The loading of fuel aboard the oil tanker in Acre began loading at the port of Skikda, more than 400 kilometers east of Algiers, and continued for 18 hours. Algeria is Africa's leading exporter of natural gas and the 7th largest in the world.
Reacting to Algeria's initiative to showcase her solidarity with the Lebanese people in these circumstances, the Lebanese Princess Hayat Arslan thanked President Tebboune for his support.
اليوم رسالتنا موجهة للجزائر بمناسبة الهبة الكريمة التي
Today, our message is destined to Algeria on the occasion of the gift granted by the Algerian president to support Lebanon in facing the electricity and energy crisis it is beset to. Such an initiative from an Arab president and a brotherly Arab country is worth consideration and respect, and is described as an Arab pride and Arab brotherliness that we always hope to see in the Arab world. And here is the Algerian president, to whom we express all our consideration and esteem, behaving as a brother and a relative who shows compassion without expecting anything in return.
On Wednesday, that was the Lebanese Princess Hayat Arslan. On Wednesday, the 7th day of the election campaign, the candidates in September 7 presidential election and their representatives continued their field visits to explain the broader outlines of their respective programs and proposed solutions adapted to the expectations and concerns of the citizens. The details with Said Bouhazi.
The leaders of the political parties supporting the independent candidate Abdelmajid Tebboune reiterated their call to vote for him so that he can complete the projects begun during his first term in office, which was marked by a number of achievements in various fields and sectors. This was notably the case of Tahar Ben Maibesh, president of the Al-Fajr Al-Jadid party, who held a meeting in Jijel calling for the consolidation of Abdelmajid Tebboune's economic choices and policies during his first term in office, which will enable Algeria to avoid the risks of debt and preserve national sovereignty. For his part, the Secretary-General of the National Liberation Front, FLN, Abdelkarim Ben Barak, maintained from Tebessa that the independent candidate Abdelmajid Tebboune is presenting an ambitious development program that encompasses all sectors and affects all social categories, which requires popular support. The leaders of other parties such as Mustafa Yahi RND and Abdelkader Bengrina El Bina movement reiterated their support for Abdelmajid Tebboune's candidacy in Bouira and Timimun respectively in view of the socio-economic gains achieved during his first term in office. Abdel Ali Hassani Sharif, the candidate for the movement of the Society for Peace MSP, told the El Mujahid Forum that the 7th September date was a crucial national event, stressing the need to strengthen national cohesion through popular support for the next president. He also felt that a massive turnout in this election would reflect an affirmation of democracy and pluralism in the country. For the MSP candidate, his electoral program entitled Forsa, or Opportunity, aims to build a solidarity and social economy based on an equitable distribution of wealth while addressing the problems of young people. On the social front, he recalled that his program plans to take charge of all sections of society in addition to revising the statutes of the various professional categories. He also called for the introduction of a parliamentary system to establish a balance of power and strengthen the mechanisms of control over the executive. It should be noted that the candidate of the Socialist Forces Front Party FFS, Youssef Aouchiche, did not take part in any field activities on Wednesday.
Now to the Middle East file. The Israeli occupation forces committed 3 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip over the last 24 hours, resulting in the killing of at least 42 Palestinians and the injury of 163 others. Medical and health sources affirm that the Palestinian death toll from the Israeli onslaught since October 7th has risen to 40,265 reported fatalities. The majority of the victims are women and children. According to the same sources, emergency services are still unable to reach many casualties and dead bodies trapped under the rubble or scattered on roads across the war-torn enclave as Israeli occupation forces continue to obstruct the movement of ambulance and civil defense crews. The United Nations has announced that the density of Palestinians per square kilometer in El Mawasi in the Gaza Strip has reached 30,000 as a result of the influx of displaced persons fleeing attacks by the Zionist occupation forces. El Mawasi lies along the coast of the towns of Deir el-Balah, Khan Yunis and Rafah, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. It lacks infrastructure and has little capacity for urban expansion. Said Bougazi again.
Since 7th October 2023, the Zionist occupation army has been waging a devastating war against Gaza and is trying to confine around 2.3 million Palestinians to the borders of the El Mawasi region. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, said that many Palestinians were taking refuge in parts of El Mawasi in the center of Gaza. UNRWA said in a statement that the ongoing military operations and repeated evacuation orders have compelled the families in Gaza to be displaced several times. It explained that around 30,000 people currently live per square kilometer in the El Mawasi region compared to 1,200 people per square kilometer before the war. Since the start of its genocidal aggression on 7th October, the Zionist entity has taken evacuation decisions forcing the Palestinians of the Gaza Strip to forced and continuous displacement. According to UN figures, 9 out of 10 people in Gaza have been displaced as a result of attacks by Zionist occupation forces. The UN figures also show that most Palestinians in Gaza are forced to move at least once a month. The displaced persons fleeing attacks by the Zionist occupation forces are living in desperate conditions and are trying to cling to life in rudimentary tents.
The Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, has renewed his call for a ceasefire following a new Israeli attack on a school run by the UN agency in the Gaza Strip. Felipe Lazzarini explained in a message on the X platform that some of the children were burnt to death and asked, "Is there any humanity left?" Several Jewish settlers today stormed the esplanade of the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the occupied holy city of Al-Quds under the protection of the Israeli occupation police. The settlers entered the holy mosque in successive groups and performed Talmudic rituals in its courtyards. For its part, the Zionist occupation police transformed the old city of Al-Quds into a military barracks and deployed hundreds of elements at the gates of the holy mosque. The UN Security Council members have held a high-level debate on regional and national conflict prevention. The details on the meeting in this report by Mohammed Khadil.
During a presentation, the Assistant Secretary General for Peace Building Support, Elizabeth Bihar, said that building and sustaining peace is central to the work of the Security Council and to the United Nations.
Peace is the foundational goal of the United Nations. Building and sustaining peace is central to the work of this Council and the organization. And yet, the number of conflicts is at a decades-long high, inflicting unimaginable suffering, devastating economies, and robbing communities of their future. As outlined in the Secretary-General's policy brief on a new agenda for peace, prioritizing conflict prevention and peace building can contribute to reversing these trends, provide people affected by violence with opportunities, and reduce the human and economic costs of war. A new agenda for peace provides member states with a roadmap to achieve this, predicated on rebuilding trust among countries, but also within each one of them, rooted in the principles of universality and solidarity.
For his part, the Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation Minister of Sierra Leone, Musa Timothy Kaba, pointed out the number of conflicts that is dividing the world are more and more difficult for any individual state to resolve by themselves. Speaking to reporters before the Security Council meeting, representatives of Sierra Leone, Slovenia and Switzerland addressed the launch of the initiative New Agenda for Peace. They reaffirmed their commitment to the United Nations Secretary General's Agenda for Peace, emphasizing trust, solidarity and universality in their joint actions for conflict prevention. Let's listen to the Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation Minister of Sierra Leone, Musa Timothy Kaba.
Sierra Leone, Slovenia and Switzerland emphasize also its critical role in supporting preventive action. We commit to proactive and comprehensive joint action for conflict prevention in support of the United Nations Secretary General's new agenda for peace, grounded in the principles of trust, solidarity and universality. Thus, to drive forward implementation of the new agenda for peace, we commit to building trust. Trust is the cornerstone of the collective security system, and confidence-building measures are an essential part of international cooperation.
The signatories outlined a commitment to enhancing conflict prevention efforts through transparency, accountability, and collaboration with international and regional organizations. They emphasized the importance of inclusive diplomacy involving diverse stakeholders and addressing root causes of conflict through economic growth, poverty eradication, and respect for human rights.
A convoy of humanitarian aid from the World Food Programme entered Sudan on Thursday via border crossing at Adre between Chad and Darfur for the first time after the 6 months of closure. Several lorries carried pulses, oil and rice, which should benefit some 13,000 people threatened by famine in the region of Kanainik in West Darfur, said the UN organization in a press release. Sudan's Minister of Health, Haytham Ibrahim, has announced that the country is facing a cholera epidemic which has so far claimed 27 lives out of a total of 556 confirmed cases. The states of Kassala and Gedaref are particularly hard hit, the minister added. Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused the Ukrainian military of trying to strike a major nuclear power plant in southwestern Russia's embroiled Kursk region. Putin said during the government meeting today, the enemy tried to attack a nuclear power station. He said the International Atomic Energy Agency has been informed they've promised to send specialists to assess the situation. Earlier, the spokesperson for the UN Nuclear Agency said its head, Rafael Grossi, would visit the Kursk plant next week, more than 2 weeks after Ukraine launched a surprise counteroffensive in the region. Grossi previously said He was personally in contact with the relevant authorities of both countries and would continue to update the international community as appropriate. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, the Kursk nuclear plant has 6 units, 2 shut down, 2 fully operational and 2 under construction. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International.
A story in an artwork. A weekly program that tells stories.